here with McDojoLife, and today's breakdown is a doozy. So it is a breakdown video of a gentleman who comes into the martial arts studio. Apparently, he seems to have some sort of mental illness, as far as I can tell. A fight breaks out where he is basically dragged and mounted into the street. And then after that, he comes back later on and assaults a minor next door. All of which involved also a police officer. It's a pretty crazy video. It's a little longer, but I promise if you stick around and watch the entire thing, and we'll talk about all the do's and don'ts for you guys in the breakdown afterwards. So let's go ahead and watch it, and then let's break it down.
All right, so here comes Crazy Guy. Crazy Guy had actually come into our gym a few weeks prior, and I did not recognize him because he'd cut his hair. The first time he came to watch class, and he just kind of sat there doing some of the same stuff he did today. But this is a Krav Maga testing, so already one of our instructors has gone over there and just kind of said, hey, this is a testing, so we need to be appropriately not disruptive. Here he goes doing some kind of a lunge. All kinds of shadow boxing happening in the corner. Here, Mike is reprimanding him because he almost kicked the Coke machine. So right off the bat, within about 10 minutes, 2 of the staff members have gotten onto him, and here he goes again. So in 5 to 15-minute increments, he would sit there and kind of just chill out, and then he would jump up. So here comes Dave again, kind of asking him and explaining, hey, this is a testing. Our guys have worked hard. They need to focus. We need you to just sit down and not be disruptive. So again, about 10, 15 minutes of him chilling, and then here we go again with some air kung fu. And this was significant because it seemed like he was trying to make his way onto the floor. So Mike immediately comes over and tells him to sit down and finally says, look, you get up again, we're going to have to ask you to leave. And here comes the bow staff. So I'm not sure who walks around with a 6-foot bow staff, but he decided that he was going to try to hit himself in the head with a bow staff. Side note, hitting yourself in the head with a wood bow staff hurts. Yes, wood is harder than hand. So at various points, and this is obviously condensed, but this is over about 2 hours, he's making comments, yelling. So at this point, Mike goes over and says, hey, look, you were asked to just sit down and not be disruptive. It's time for you to leave. Asks politely, but as you can see by the body language, the posturing here, he is immediately getting mad about this. He's arguing with us, saying, you said one more time, some gibberish. At one point, it seemed like he said, I accept the challenge, which that's never a good sign. So you can kind of see the staff flocking towards this corner. Mike immediately grabs the bow staff and goes to place it outside to remove the threat of that weapon. Now he's using that as an attempt to say, no, I'm not going to leave without my staff. So Mike tells him, hey, you can grab it on your way out. It's right there for you to grab. You need to leave. Multiple attempts at this point have been made to politely tell him that he needs to get out. So at this point, the entire staff is flocked in this corner. A couple of us have chimed in just telling him that he needs to go ahead and leave. You see one of our students on the left side of the screen there pointing his hand saying this is criminal trespass. He's making the argument now that this is a public space, which it's not. So quickly a couple of us tell him, no, it's not a public space. You've been asked to leave. This is private property and you're now trespassing. He gets up. The glasses have come off and into his pocket, which is a pretty clear indicator. Hand gesturing. So at this point, it seems very likely that it's going to escalate quickly. Gesturing back towards the corner, and then here he goes. He turns and swings towards Mike. Mike blocks, single collar tie, tries to foot trip. He actually steps out and around, so they wind up going through the door. And here, Mike lands in half guard. So as soon as that first swing was thrown, I actually got on the phone with the police to explain what was going on. Here you can see Mike moving to transition to full mount. At this point, he's already verbalized that he does not want to hurt Crazy Guy and is asking him to stop fighting and stop resisting, that we're waiting for the police. I come out to check on the situation here. I've already called the police. They've been dispatched, and we're just waiting for them to arrive. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of squabble. So Mike had a knife in the appendix position, and at some point, we have not figured out where it is on this video. At some point, he reaches for it, and I think this is right after that happens. Mike removed the knife and handed it off to one of the other staff members to basically take out of the equation. And here again, he's starting to struggle. We're watching. And here in just a second, he's going to attempt to grab Mike's groin. Our immediate concern as we're moving around here is that we saw him reaching towards his pocket and we weren't sure what was in his pocket. And I think that wound up actually being him just grabbing at Mike's groin. Not that that's a whole lot nicer than grabbing for a weapon. So here, Mike has him just controlled and again, continually verbalizing for him to stop resisting, stop fighting. Mike had damaged one of his toes on the initial scuffle out of the door. So some of the movement and positioning here is to try to take some pressure off of that toe. Here he's asked Matt to move that bow staff because the bow staff got in the way. It was within arm's grasp of the guy, so we wanted to make sure that that was removed from the equation. And here, Mike is switching between a grapevine to a butterfly position in the full mount, which we discovered after the fact was not actually tactical. It was more to save his poor freezing toes. It was really cold. You guys can see it's been raining all day. It was freezing. It was, I think, right at like 38 or 39 degrees, so not super pleasant. So some of this was just trying to save the toes. And here Mike is starting to move up into high mount because, again, the guy tried to grab at his groin. So moving up into a high mount position to try to take away some of those options. And in just a second here, you'll see the arms wrap up. So at this point, we're hoping the police are arriving ASAP. Here you'll see Mike go to kind of a modified no-gi Ezekiel position to try to force the guy's hands back up and away from, again, grabbing the groin. And here comes the police officer. So she's asking Mike to get up, and immediately he's saying, this is not a good place to cuff him. I have control. Trying to move him onto his belly. She's asked him more than once at this point already to put his hands behind his back, and he's refused to comply. So his hands are out. Mike starts to move to try to take his back, to try to roll him onto his belly, and he sticks his hands straight out to try to refute that. So he's immediately not complying with absolutely anything the officer's asking him to do. And she finally asks Mike to get up. So she puts a handcuff on one of his hands but lets go. So he's got one handcuff on one hand with the other cuff dangling off of that hand. And she's asking again that Mike gets up, saying she's got this, that she's ready to cuff him. So Mike is sort of maintaining control and trying to verbalize with her, saying that he's still being resistant. So here we go in just a second. And at this point, Mike had verbalized also that it was a mistake to put a cuff on and leave it hanging off his wrist, because essentially if he goes to swing at anybody, he's got a sharp metal object attached to that hand. So here they're verbalizing and attempting to de-escalate. Mike goes ahead and transitions to knee on belly, goes to stand up, and immediately Crazy Guy pops up. He's combative, resistant. The officer is again telling him to comply, to put his hands behind his back. He's refusing to do so. You see her grabbing at the cuff that's loose. And he's verbalizing and just refusing. So here again, everybody's trying to kind of de-escalate the situation and telling him that he needs to just comply. Mike's keeping the hands up, ready to control. And she's got one hand on his cuffed wrist and the other hand on the handcuff that's loose, but he is refusing to comply. So Mike steps back and gets him in a double chicken wing to control both those arms. And again, you see him yelling at her, refusing to comply, resisting, being combative. So she goes to get behind him, and he's turning. So finally Mike transitions to the front, snap down right into a front headlock guillotine position. And now a bunch of bystanders are jumping in because this guy is being super combative. And down he goes. So it's worth noting here that at no point from the arrival of the officer to the point that they finally got him subdued, at no point was he complying with her requests. He was combative, he was resistant the entire time, and finally some bystanders jumped in when he continued to become aggressive. So the police take him and say that they're going to drop him somewhere far away, but as you guys can see, our friend here is back. This is not even 30 minutes later at the dollar store next to our academy. He has at this point assaulted an underage girl inside the store and is now refusing to leave after being asked by both managers to get out. We had one of the girls that worked at the store run over to the academy and ask us for help.
Is that what you're saying? Just leave. Is that what you're saying?
Simone, tell all the customers to leave and lock the door.
They're on their way. Please leave.
All the customers leave and lock the door.
Okay, so you saw the whole situation. So where am I in the
manager?
If you're the
You
manager,
in the room because I asked you to get my sword.
if you're the manager, where am I?
You
in the
got
law?
aggressive with her.
I asked you one question. I asked you a question. I said, were you not?
So he's already been told to leave by the manager, as you guys can hear, multiple times.
At the door?
The first thing that anybody said to him as we came in here, one of our staff members was asking him to just leave. Please just leave. Just leave.
Ask me a question. Okay, I'm walking away. Ask me a question.
And you turn around. Why does it matter? Why does it matter? No, move, Gina. Move.
They cited the fact that they recognized him as being the aggressor in the incident at the academy as being the reason that they asked him to leave. And he took great issue with that, claiming he was just trying to be a patron of the store. One of us at this point has vocalized that it is the right to refuse service. He didn't like that either. So now he's finally saying, okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Where to go?
Yes, sir.
On my life.
Yes, sir.
And a second ago, when Mike popped up behind him, he said, that's the second time you done suck up behind me. Third time we're going to have a problem, which of course is a direct threat.
Thank you, sir.
And as you guys have heard probably no less than 30 times he's been asked to leave. Finally, he gets out of the store. And rest in peace, door.
All right, so if you've stuck around up to this point, all the way through this video, congratulations, you made it. Now we can start breaking it down. It took us long enough, damn it. So, excuse me, there's obviously a lot of things that could have gone right. There's a lot of things that did go right. And I just want to go through this kind of piece by piece, a little bit more for martial arts school owners and how to handle these types of situations, or business owners, because this actually kind of stuff happens quite a bit at martial arts studios, unfortunately. People randomly coming in off the street, maybe they're not mentally stable, like I can assume that this gentleman isn't, and how do you handle that? So I took out 10 clips, 10 little important notes. Now, obviously, if you watch this video, there's probably things that you find more important than others about the situation, a lot of what ifs. I just want to handle a couple that I noted, and just go over them just a little piece by piece and play by play, okay? So let's go ahead and get to this first little part, right? So this first little part is the gentleman almost kicks the Coke machine. So this says a lot about perspective and where their mindsets are at this particular point. At this point, they've repeatedly asked this gentleman to make sure that they're not interrupting, that he's not interrupting their testing. I would always suggest that after you've thrown out your first verbal warning and you said, what if, like for instance, hey, please have a seat or we're going to have to ask you to leave. It's very similar to like when you're dealing with children. Whenever you deal with a child and you say, please do this or else, and you don't ever do the or else, it's going to escalate. And now it's considered a game to the child. So I want to just go ahead and show this little clip and then talk about the perspective.
Here he goes doing some kind of a lunge. All kinds of shadow boxing happening in the corner. Here, Mike is reprimanding him because he almost kicked the Coke machine.
So in that clip, right, from what we can see, it's quite obvious that he's not anywhere close near to the soda machine, right? We can see that. It's something that we can observe. It's something that we can see in hindsight. But from the angle that that gentleman was at, it was very difficult to see. Now, of course, they're trying to keep somewhat of a watchful eye on this guy because he's becoming somewhat of a disturbance. But if you feel like he's that much of a disturbance, it's time to ask him to leave him. We'll continue to go down this road a little bit more. Let's go ahead and see what happens in the next.
It was over about 2 hours. He's making comments, yelling. So at this point, Mike goes over and says, hey, look, you were asked to just sit down and not be disruptive. It's time for you to leave.
So at this point, I just want to play that clip just a little bit because you didn't catch it all, but it's only like a couple seconds. So let's play it one more time.
So at various points, and this is obviously condensed, but this is over about 2 hours, he's making comments, yelling. So at this point, Mike goes over and says, hey, look, you were asked to just sit down and not be disruptive. It's time for you to leave.
So that's another thing to kind of note here. This gentleman has been asked for over 2 hours to leave. I'm sorry, but if somebody's interrupted more than once in my particular program, wherever I've been or wherever I consulted at, it's time to ask them to leave way before 2 hours. So I think another issue here is that this guy's gotten a little bit too comfortable with where he is because the situation wasn't handled a little more timely. So that's definitely something to take note of. You know, once you said, hey, you need to leave or else, the next things out of your mouth should be what we're going to talk about next. So let's go ahead and see the next part here. So the next particular part here, they remove the weapon from the situation, which is also obviously an issue. So let's go and check it out and talk about it.
You can kind of see the staff flocking towards this corner. Mike immediately grabs the bow staff and goes to place it outside to remove the threat of that weapon. Now he's using that as an attempt to say, no, I'm not going to leave without my staff.
So this is one of a couple things that kind of triggered some thoughts here. Mostly because I actually think that the gentleman who might be mentally disturbed who came in, he may have a mental illness. I don't know. He may be on drugs or it may just be weird as fuck. But this is one of the reasons, one of many reasons I think that the guy actually may have trained before. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go on. But, you know, maybe the guy was trying to reconnect or something like that. And he comes into the studio looking to try to like watch a class. I don't know. But his psycho won't let him sit still for more than 5 seconds. But this is called escalation. This is not de-escalation, believe it or not. At that particular clip, you see there's 2 or 3 staff members right there closer to him. I want you to think about de-escalation is getting farther away and escalation is getting closer. So whenever you see a situation like this and you're getting closer and closer into somebody's personal space, it's going to make them on edge. It's going to make them a little more itchy. At this particular point, when they've made the decision that they are going to try to actually make this man move, this is where you need to call the police. It needs to be verbally stated. Hey, excuse me, Susan, whoever the staff member is. Can you do me a favor? Let's go ahead and call the police. And you let them know, hey, man, I don't want any issues with you, but the police are going to be here in 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and go so it doesn't get any worse than it is. If you leave right now, there won't be any issues, any problems. You got to step away from and de-escalate. Now, they did remove a weapon, which could be a potential issue, and I do understand that that's a good thing. But at the same time, it's time to call the police at that point, right then. So let's continue down this path here. Let's see where this goes from here. Sorry, it takes a second with this program.
He gets up, the glasses have come off and into his pocket, which is a pretty clear indicator. Hand gesturing. So at this point, it seems very likely that it's going to escalate quickly. Gesturing back towards the corner, and then here he
Now, this is pivotal, what just happened. Now, I'm going to leave it on this screen so that way you guys can see, and hopefully the program is working like it should and shows you exactly what I need to see. But in this particular instance, you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 staff members fairly close. You can see multiple people standing off to the side looking at the situation. So this has been escalated, not de-escalated. You know, it's one of those things where obviously it's tense. You want somebody to do something and respond, but they don't do what you've asked them to do. But if you watch this clip one more time, I want you to see exactly what happens with the gentleman who's standing there and the gentleman who's about to take a swing. Yes, the gentleman's about to take a swing, but this is called escalation. Let's check it out one more time.
He gets up, the glasses have come off and into his pocket, which is a pretty clear indicator. Hand gesturing. So at this point, it seems very likely that it's going to escalate quickly. Gesturing back towards the corner, and then here he goes.
Now, if you were paying attention, you can see that the gentleman in the video is referred to as Mike, has gotten really, really close. And when you're dealing with de-escalation, if you're close enough to touch somebody, you're too close to de-escalate. Just throwing it out there. Is it possible? Yes. But when you're in somebody's face, it's personal bubble, right? It makes people very, very tense. So really, if you really need to de-escalate the situation, what you do here is you take a couple steps back. You ask your staff members to say, hey guys, don't worry about it. You guys move on. You ask one of your staff members to call the police, and then you direct this person out the door by verbally commanding them, because this gentleman at this point has not been technically physical with anyone. He's just being an annoying dick. But really at this point, Mike reaches in, he gets a lot closer, and I don't know what was said. So the gentleman might have been making physical threats. He might have been coming in close because he was worried that the guy would be running over there to hurt his female staff member. All of that I understand. So I get what was going on, and I understand in a tense situation, it can be kind of hard to deal with. I understand all of that. So, but you know, that's what happens. Now let's go ahead and continue to go past this and what happens when they get out of the door. So again, this is a lot to dissect. So if you're still with me, I appreciate it. And we're going to keep working on this as we go. So let's see what happens right at that moment.
Single collar tie, tries to foot trip. He actually steps out and around, so they wind up going.
Sorry, the sync was off a little bit, so I'm going to try to fix that right now.
Gesturing back towards the corner, and then here he goes. He turns and swings towards Mike. Mike blocks, single collar tie, tries to foot trip. He actually steps out and around, so they wind up going through the door. And here, Mike lands in half guard.
All right, so this is another reason I actually think that maybe the guy on bottom has trained before. I don't think that maybe he did a lot, and I think maybe he really just maybe is an enthusiast or whatever, but this is the second time. One, he came in with like a bow staff, so maybe he was just crazy pretending that he was some kind of kung fu master, right? But then on the other hand, as soon as they go down, this guy actually goes to half guard. He wraps his legs around the other person's leg. Now, I'm not saying that people who are untrained can't do this. I'm just saying that it's a little more rare to see, I guess you could say, because usually by this point they're already passed and the side control or mounted. But this guy actually tries to tie up that leg, which is interesting. Another thing to note is there are no strikes thrown as of right now, which I think is fascinating. Nobody's actually trying to hit or hurt each other, which is a good thing. I'm going to say that that is a great thing. I think that's one of the most beautiful things about this particular video in terms of how it was handled in a positive way. I know I'm talking about some negatives, but in a positive way, he doesn't actually hurt the guy. He's trying to just control him. He's trying to get to a dominant position. He's trying to make sure that the guy understands, like, yo, you need to stop. And as a matter of fact, when he actually gets the takedown, one, he falls. He's on top in a top dominant position, which is good. And then he switches his hands to like an Americana kind of grip. So that way he's isolating one of the arms, almost like a submission, but his arm is under the guy's head. So not really going to get that. But at least it's a position of trying to control. So let's continue with another major thing that happens, which is very important to note.
There's a little bit of squabble. So Mike had a knife in the appendix position, and at some point, we have not figured out where it is on this video. At some point, he reaches for it, and I think this is right after that happens. Mike removed the knife and handed it off to one of the other staff members.
So in the comments section of this video, whenever I was getting the whenever I was reading through the comments and posting it this morning, because I typically do that, I'll post the video on Instagram. I'll wait a few hours, read some of the comments, because sometimes people observe some things that I might not have noticed. And one of the major things that did come up was the knife thing. A lot of people think that the gentleman who walked into the building had the knife. No, the gentleman who walked into the building did not have the knife. The instructor, the dude, Mike, had the knife in his waistband, it sounds. And so it was removed and tossed off to the side. So the guy didn't pull a knife, but I'm very glad that they removed the weapon from the situation, because you really don't want to keep escalating it any farther, and you don't want anybody to get stabbed. So good job on that. So let's continue. Here's another little note as well. I think this is also fascinating. So let's check this out.
The police are arriving ASAP. Here you'll see Mike go to kind of a modified no-gi Ezekiel position to try to force the guy's hands back up and away from, again, grabbing the groin.
So as a defense to getting his groin grabbed, he started to choke the guy. And I'm not going to lie, like whenever you're grabbing someone by the testicles, like, yeah, pain compliance sucks. It makes you want to not like do much. But when you're choked and you can't breathe, you have a decision to make. Do I continue to hopefully this pain compliance will work so I can breathe again, or I just let go? But if you watch that particular section of the video, the guy on the bottom, this is another reason I think maybe the guy has trained before, is the guy actually taps him like as if he was rolling jujitsu or something. So like all of these little signs make me think that maybe at one point in time, maybe this guy really wanted to train, or maybe this guy is trained here and there. I don't think that he's highly trained, and I think that his mental health is a huge question here, but he tapped. And so that's something that's also kind of struck me as interesting about this entire situation is, why did he tap unless he actually has trained before? So just a little note that I kind of added that I thought was interesting. Now, at this point, a police officer does show up, and this is a major thing. This is more what I'm said about even past the escalation and stuff like that. Could it have been handled better? Yeah, but I think that once it got escalated to the point where it did, I think the instructor did a wonderful job of not hurting the guy. He's controlling him. He's not trying to get anybody hurt here. So kudos for the instructor on that. Could have the beginning of it been handled better? Yeah, but it all could have been handled better, especially by the police officer who shows up. So let's check that out.
So she puts a handcuff on one of his hands but lets go. So he's got one handcuff on one hand with the other cuff dangling off of that hand.
So at this point, she has handcuffed this gentleman. All right. She only put one cuff on. She only put it on one arm. That's it. So he's got a handcuff, a hand free, with now a sharp metal object that he could use as a weapon. He can grab the other end and stab the gentleman on top of him. The female officer doesn't really seem to be taking charge of the situation. And I'm not trying to down law enforcement. I'm not trying to down females in any way. I'm really not trying to down anybody. I'm trying to use this as a learning tool. But you definitely don't want to handcuff half the person and just let them be free to flail around and hit people with the sharp metal thing that's now dangling on their wrist. Probably not smart. And I'm pretty sure typically whenever you're called out to a situation like this where there's somebody who's being physically violent, from what I've noticed, it seems like it's usually more than one police officer who shows up. But let's continue to keep this going, because there's so much more to kind of dissect and talk about here. And we're almost to the end if you stuck around this far. So then I'd love to hear your opinions in the comment section after the video. So let's look at the little end here.
Refusing to comply, resisting, being combative. So she goes to get behind him, and he's turning. So finally Mike transitions to the front, snap down right into a front headlock guillotine position. And now a bunch of bystanders are jumping in because this guy is being super combative. And down he goes.
That probably should have happened way earlier. You know, I get it. You know, you want you got your instructor, you feel like he's handling it well, but there's so many things that can happen so quickly in such a short amount of time when you're dealing with somebody who's crazy, that it's always better to have the numbers. And when you're dealing with somebody who you have to take down, I understand that we feel, okay, I got it, I can handle this. But there's so many what ifs. What if that guy had a knife and he pulls it out and that arm's free and you're getting stabbed? What happens if the guy had a gun? What happens if he has several diseases, you know, like, and you are scuffling around the ground? Like, you really want to try to isolate this dude as much as humanly possible. That's why whenever police show up to a scene like that, there's always multiple police who jump on one dude. They're just trying to get it taken care of, get the guy get the guy put in a less dominant position so that way they can cuff him and they can put him into a car and they can take him and book him. So whenever you're dealing with a situation like this with multiple people around, as long as you're not beating the living crap out of this dude, you should probably kind of help in a little bit. And I understand that we all want to take care of the situation, keep our people safe. but you also got to wonder about keeping yourself safe as well. So let's go ahead and go 30 minutes later. Let's see what happens. This is what baffles me again about the police officer. I don't understand what happened here.
Away, but as you guys can see, our friend here is back. This is not even 30 minutes later at the dollar store next to our academy. He has at this point assaulted an underage girl inside of the store and is now refusing to leave after being asked by both managers to get out.
Again, I am a little baffled at this point about what's going on. The dude comes in, he assaults a minor, call the police. You don't need to handle this on your own. The lady has a stick. She's waving in his face. Like, dude, we have police for a reason. You call them and you let this gentleman know, look, police are on the way. They're going to handle it. And I understand up to that point, you need to keep engaging with the gentleman, maybe to stop him from doing anything that might be malicious or to hurt other people. And that's completely fine. But you need to repeatedly let this guy know that, hey, police are on the way, dude. Let him have that decision. Does he want to go to jail or does he want to go free? And most people want to leave the situation because they don't want to go to jail. So it's kind of like the same thing where people wear a mask whenever they rob people or they wear, so they don't get their face seen. So that way they don't go to jail. Most people who are committing crimes don't want to go to jail, so this guy may or may not have been on a billion things. It could have been 100 million things that could have happened here. But the major thing to take away from this is whenever you're trying to de-escalate the situation, you don't de-escalate with physical force. You need to de-escalate with your words and space. Leave space. If you're close enough to touch somebody, you're way too close to de-escalate. You need to back away a little bit and try to talk them down. You really do. You need space. You need them to be able to breathe, right? And if you do handle it physically or if it does become physical, I do think that this particular academy did a great job about doing that. I will say this, though, the police officer definitely had some things that she needs to work on. There was a knife that could have possibly been involved. I don't know the entire story, but I will definitely say this is that you don't want to handcuff the dude halfway and just like back off and just like let him be free with this metal object now that could be construed as a weapon. Not safe. And then afterwards to let the dude go. What happened after that? Did you let the dude go on the side of the road? He went immediately back and assaulted a minor. My mind is a little blown by that as well. So definitely a lot of things to learn from here. I'd really like your comments, your opinions, your ideas and thoughts about this situation. I'd really like to know what your thoughts are on this in the comment section below. So like everybody else on YouTube, like, comment, share, subscribe, and all that other crap YouTube people ask you to do. Thank you for the support. Hopefully you enjoyed the breakdown. Keep the martial arts legit.